You open your eyes inside your warm, comfortable modern bedroom at exactly 7 o'clock in the morning. Your smartphone alarm is screaming a chaotic electronic melody designed to induce immediate panic. You roll out of bed, scramble to find your matching pants, and stumble toward the kitchen. You grab a shiny plastic cup of coffee that was delivered directly to your doorstep by a motorcycle courier. You sip this hot, sweet beverage while staring at your screen. Have you ever stopped to think about what is actually inside that paper cup? The roasted beans were grown on a mountain slope in Brazil, harvested by local farmers, and packed into burlap sacks. Those sacks were loaded onto a massive diesel cargo ship, operated by a Danish shipping company, sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, and processed in an industrial roasting facility in Italy. The plastic lid was manufactured in a factory in South Korea, using oil drilled in Saudi Arabia. The cardboard sleeve was made from pine trees grown in Canada. You are wearing a soft cotton t-shirt, stitched in Vietnam using cotton grown in Egypt. You are sliding your fingers across a glass screen designed in California, powered by microchips fabricated in Taiwan, using rare minerals mined in the deep forests of Africa, and assembled in a massive facility in China. You feel like a lone warrior conquering your corporate career. You think you are completely independent, but in reality, you are a delicate passenger, riding on the shoulders of 8 billion complete strangers. But let us transport your mind back 50,000 years into the deep, dark, freezing past of prehistoric Europe. Imagine waking up when your body is finally ready, because there are no alarm clocks to shatter your peace. But as you open your eyes, your body is instantly shivering from the brutal howling wind of an Ice Age blizzard, screaming outside your limestone cave. The floor is cold hard and covered in a thick layer of gray ash from last night's dying fire. You reach into your leather storage bag, hoping to find a warm, comforting meal to start your day. Instead, you pull out the last 3 dry, tough scraps of deer meat, covered in soot and smelling of old smoke. You chew on this leathery protein for 20 minutes just to make it soft enough to swallow. The air is freezing. Your breath turns into white clouds of vapor in the dark cave. You look out of the cave entrance, and all you see is an endless white desert of snow and ice. The massive herds of woolly mammoths and bison have migrated hundreds of kilometers to the south because the northern glaciers are rapidly expanding. There is no local grocery store. There is no food delivery app. There is no internet connection to check the weather forecast. Your nearest human neighbor is a family living in another cave over 100 kilometers away across a treacherous mountain range. And if you happen to run into them while searching for food, they will not offer you a cup of coffee. They will likely raise a sharp stone spear and try to drive it through your chest to protect their territory. For 99% of human history, this terrifying isolation was not a crazy thought experiment. This was the raw, daily reality of survival for hundreds of thousands of years. How did your thin, fragile ancestors manage to conquer this hostile, freezing world, while our incredibly powerful, muscular Neanderthal cousins slowly faded into complete evolutionary extinction? The answer is not that we had bigger brains. The answer is not that we were better hunters. The answer is that our ancestors did something that Neanderthals simply could not comprehend. They learned how to trade with complete strangers. Let us reconstruct the physical and social landscape of Neanderthal Europe. Neanderthals were not the stupid, grunting cavemen shown in modern Hollywood movies. They were actually absolute masterpieces of Ice Age evolution. They were built like heavy-duty brick walls. A typical Neanderthal male possessed shoulders twice as wide as yours, a thick neck with a massive jaw, and a rib cage shaped like a wooden barrel. Their bones were incredibly thick, and their muscles were twice as dense as yours. They did not need expensive brand-name winter jackets because their thick, compact bodies conserved heat with perfect efficiency. But this biological luxury was an incredibly expensive energy trap. Because of their massive muscle mass in the extreme cold, a single Neanderthal male needed to consume up to 5,000 calories every single day just to keep his body running. Compare that to a modern human who gets anxious if they eat more than 2,000 calories. To get those 5,000 calories, Neanderthals could not rely on picking wild berries or digging up small roots from the frozen ground. They had to hunt the most dangerous megafauna on the planet. We are talking about giant woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and massive bison. Because Neanderthals did not have lightweight bows and arrows or throwing spears, they had to hunt up close. Their weapons were heavy, thick wooden shafts tipped with broad, handcrafted stone points. To kill a mammoth, a Neanderthal hunter had to run directly up to the screaming, angry beast, dodge its giant tusks, and manually drive the heavy spear into its thick hide from a distance of only a few feet. Imagine doing this every single week just to feed your family. It is the equivalent of playing a life-or-death game of football against a 3-ton truck with zero protective gear. When modern anthropologists examine Neanderthal skeletons, they find a heartbreaking pattern of healed bone fractures. Their skulls, collarbones, and limbs are covered in severe impact scars that perfectly match the injuries found in modern professional rodeo cowboys. Every single hunt was a bone-crushing trauma. And because their hunting style was so dangerous, they could not afford to live in large groups. A group of 50 Neanderthals would starve within a week. Instead, they lived in tiny, isolated family bands of 8 to 12 individuals. They spent their entire lives inside a single, quiet valley, completely cut off from the rest of the world by towering glaciers and territories controlled by massive cave hyenas. They were biologically lonely. Archaeological excavations show that Neanderthals almost never used raw materials sourced from more than 30 kilometers away from their home caves. If they lived near a river with poor quality flint, they simply used that bad flint for their entire lives, never traveling to the next valley where high-quality stone was abundant. This social isolation was a ticking biological time bomb. If a sudden local plague swept through their valley, or if a severe winter caused their local bison herd to migrate elsewhere, that small Neanderthal family had no safety net. They had no friends to call. They had no allies to borrow food from. They simply starved to death in the cold darkness of their cave. And their entire evolutionary lineage was permanently extinguished. Now let us contrast this extreme isolation with the earliest archaeological footprints of your Homo sapiens ancestors as they moved into the exact same freezing European landscape. Homo sapiens were physically weaker than Neanderthals. We were taller, thinner, and possessed much lighter bones. We did not have those massive built-in muscle jackets to protect us from the sub-zero winds. But we had a secret weapon that was far more powerful than physical strength. We had a massive, invisible web of social connections. When archaeologists excavate early sapiens campsites in the cold interior of Germany, they find things that simply should not be there. They find beautiful polished shells from the Mediterranean Sea, located more than 600 kilometers away from the coast. They find beautiful pieces of volcanic glass, known as obsidian, that can only be found in specific volcanic regions hundreds of miles away. These delicate seashells and sharp pieces of volcanic glass did not walk across the ice by themselves. They were passed from hand to hand, from tribe to tribe, across an expansive prehistoric trade highway. If a sapiens band living in Germany suffered a terrible hunting season because the local herds migrated early, they did not sit in their cave and wait to starve. They packed up their leather tents and traveled along these established obsidian trails. They walked to neighboring valleys where they met other sapiens tribes. Even if these tribes spoke slightly different dialects, they recognized each other. How? Because they wore the same style of bead necklaces. They shared the same artistic cave drawings. They exchanged the same prized pieces of red ochre and volcanic glass. These early trade networks functioned as a brilliant system of primitive economic insurance. The exchange of physical items, like stone tools and shells, was actually secondary to the exchange of life-saving assets. They traded geographical information, weather warnings, and survival strategies. When you traded a sharp piece of obsidian with a neighbor, you were not just getting a better knife. You were building a social contract. You were creating an alliance. To understand how this worked in daily practice, we can look at the brilliant research of anthropologist Polly Wiesner. For decades, she studied the Juhoansi people, a modern hunter-gatherer society living in the harsh, unpredictable environment of the Kalahari Desert. She documented a beautiful social system called charo, which translates to a system of mutual, long-term gift exchange. In this society, people spend a massive amount of time crafting small, beautiful objects, like beaded necklaces made of ostrich eggshells, polished wooden pipes, and decorated leather bags. These objects have almost no practical survival value. You cannot eat an ostrich eggshell bead. You cannot hunt a kudu with a wooden pipe. Yet the Juhoansi people travel hundreds of kilometers across the burning desert just to give these small items to partners in other bands. This is not a commercial market where you try to make a profit. In fact, it is considered highly offensive to trade for immediate profit. Instead, when you accept a sharo gift, you enter into a sacred, lifelong partnership of mutual support. If a severe drought hits your territory and all the water holes dry up, you do not panic. You gather your family and walk across the desert to the territory of your sharo partner. When you arrive, they do not fight you. They welcome you with open arms, share their water, and feed your children. They do this because they know that next year the drought might hit their territory, and they will need to travel to your valley for survival. This is the first social security system in human history. It was not written on paper. It was not managed by a government. It was woven directly into the exchange of simple, symbolic gifts. Your Sapiens ancestors used this exact same Haro-style trading system to conquer the Ice Age. While Neanderthal families were starving in their isolated, lonely valleys, Sapiens families were using their trade networks to move freely across the continent, always finding a warm fire and a friendly face waiting for them over the next mountain range. Why did Sapiens have this unique ability to trust and trade with complete strangers, while Neanderthals remained trapped in their tiny family circles? The secret lies in a massive cognitive revolution that reshaped the human brain. Sapiens developed the unique ability to believe in shared, abstract myths. We are the only species on the planet that can create and trust things that do not physically exist. Think about a modern dollar bill. It is just a piece of green paper with ink on it. You cannot eat it, you cannot wear it, and you cannot use it to build a shelter. Yet millions of people who have never met each other will work 40 hours a week because they all share the exact same belief in the abstract value of that paper. Neanderthals could not do this. They had a hyper-realistic, highly practical style of thinking. If you showed a Neanderthal a beautiful seashell, they would see a useless piece of calcium that could not help them kill a cave bear. They could not understand how a small shell could represent a promise of friendship or a treaty of peace. Because they lacked this symbolic cognitive bridge, they could never build a relationship with a stranger. Every stranger was a potential killer. This cognitive limitation created a massive technology gap between the two species. Because sapiens were constantly trading and communicating, we experienced what scientists call the ratchet effect. This is a beautiful phenomenon, where human knowledge only moves forward, building upon itself over time, without ever slipping back. If a sapiens hunter in France invented a better way to carve a bone harpoon, that invention was quickly traded to a neighbor, who passed it to another tribe, who improved it by adding a barbed edge. Within a few decades, every sapiens tribe in Europe was using the superior barbed harpoon. The technology was locked in and could never be lost. But if a Neanderthal genius in Germany invented a brilliant new way to start a fire using specialized minerals, that knowledge was trapped inside their tiny family. When that family died out, the invention died with them. The Neanderthals had to continuously relearn the basic skills of survival from scratch, generation after generation, for 300,000 years. They were trapped in a loop of technological stagnation, while sapiens were riding an exponential wave of collaborative innovation. During the late Pleistocene epoch, the climate of Europe became wildly volatile. It was a chaotic roller coaster of sudden, extreme temperature shifts. Glaciers would advance hundreds of kilometers in a few decades, burying hunting grounds under ice, and then suddenly retreat, turning forests into grassy steppes. This climate chaos acted as a brutal evolutionary filter. Neanderthals, with their isolated lifestyle, simply could not cope with this rapid pace of change. As their valleys became increasingly cold and resources dwindled, they retreated into even smaller, more isolated pocket territories called refugia. This isolation led to a catastrophic genetic disaster. Because they had no trade networks and no contact with other groups, they were forced to mate with their close relatives. When Svante Pääbo and his team of geneticists sequenced the genomes of Neanderthal fossils found in Siberian caves, they made a shocking discovery. The DNA revealed that the parents of these Neanderthals were often half-siblings or uncles and nieces. This extreme inbreeding severely weakened their immune systems, lowered their fertility rates, and made them highly vulnerable to any new pathogens. Homo sapiens, on the other hand, used their massive social networks as a genetic shield. We exchanged mates across vast distances, ensuring our gene pool remained incredibly diverse, healthy, and resilient. When a new Ice Age virus swept through Europe, sapiens easily fought it off because of our diverse immune systems. Neanderthals, with their compromised inbred genetics, were wiped out by the exact same pathogen. We did not destroy them with weapons. We did not march into their caves and launch a bloody war. We simply out-cooperated them. We out-traded them. We watched them slowly fade away in their lonely, cold valleys, while our global tribe continued to grow, connect, and thrive. When you look at this ancient evolutionary drama, you realize a profound truth about your modern life. We like to look at our massive global economy, our international shipping containers, and our complex digital networks as modern triumphs of high technology. But in reality, your smartphone, your fast food delivery, and your global trade systems are just the high-tech versions of the ancient obsidian trails and shell necklaces. The human species is built to connect. We are biologically wired to trade, to trust, and to build networks with complete strangers. It is the single most powerful survival tool our species has ever possessed. When we lock ourselves in our modern, isolated apartments, hiding behind screens and refusing to connect with our communities, we are acting like the lonely Neanderthals in their isolated caves. We are rejecting the very trait that made us sapiens. So the next time you walk out of your office building at the end of a long, stressful workday, step into the crowded city street. Look at the thousands of strangers rushing past you, all operating under the invisible, shared rules of a global society. Smile as you watch a delivery driver hand a package to a customer, or a barista hand a cup of coffee to a busy commuter. Realize that this chaotic, beautiful web of human exchange is not a modern artificial construct. It is a 50,000-year-old survival strategy that kept your ancestors alive through the freezing winds of the Ice Age. And as you arrive back at your warm, comfortable home, lock the door and lie down in your bed to fall into a peaceful sleep. Without the fear of predators, you can rest easy, knowing that the ancient spirit of the global tribe is still flowing through your veins, keeping you safe, connected, and alive in a world built entirely on the power of human cooperation.